I left it down at the creek. I'll go get it. You better run, Cornbread chuckled. Elijah hurried back as far as his legs could carry him. Knowing the woods like the beat of his own heart, he took the quickest route. Around the pond where toads spawned, through the grove of rotted tree stumps, under the tree where the owls slept. He reached the part of the creek where wet leaves carpeted the forest floor. Lightning bugs glowed like tiny drifting stars, and overhanging branches blocked all but a few strands of sunlight. His pipe sat on a stump, right where he left it. Elijah started for it when the sound of a soft splash made him jump. A fat little boy appeared from nowhere, creeping through the bulrushes. Dressed in muddy overalls, the boy checked the underside of every leaf, a clump of mud in his hand. He smelled sharp and sweet like grass after the rain. Walking right by Elijah, he picked the pipe off his stump and examined it. "Let go of that!" Elijah yelled. The fat boy shrieked, dropped it in the creek, and dove behind a tree. "That mine!" The boy peered out at him. "You left it there. How was I supposed to know it was yours?" Younger than Elijah, he had old eyes. World-weary and wise brown eyes, like paws. "You lucky I don't hit you," said Elijah, rubbing the mud off the pipe. "What you doing here?" The boy started checking leaves again. "What did it look like? I'm picking the bugs off them crops like my daddy told me to." "Them ain't no crops," said Elijah. "They's weeds." "Don't you got sense enough to pour piss out of a boot? I'm practicing." Proudly showing his handful of grubs, the strange boy waded through the muddy creek, faster than Elijah ever saw anyone move through water. Where his feet touched, the water rippled like the tiniest pebble had disturbed it. Within moments he was several yards away, darting among the trees like a leaf in autumn. Elijah realized this was the same boy he saw leave the funeral that morning. He said that phrase Man-Boy always used, and the resemblance was just too strong. Maybe he was one of Man-Boy's 30 grandchildren. "Hey!" he yelled, taking off after him. "Why you leave the funeral?" He felt 100 years old instead of 10, struggling to keep up with the fleet fat boy. Elijah's eyes could barely follow him. Laughing, the boy hid from him. One minute he was skipping in the creek, the next he was behind a tree. His laughter rang from every direction. Suddenly, a deep, melodic voice boomed, "Man-Boy!" A figure stood in the creek, so tall and thin Elijah first mistook it for a tree. No, it was a man, he realized. A very old man with brown skin that stretched like parchment across his face. His three-piece suit must have looked nice, once. Now it was worn. Its black fade to gray, a button missing on the waistcoat covered in muck. He wore a wide-brimmed, moth-eaten hat and a bow tie around his long neck. Thick gray hair cascaded to his shoulders. Ankle-deep in the water, he regarded the fat boy, irritatedly. "There you are," he groaned, and the hickories groaned with him. Slowly the old man approached, holding out his hand. The boy ran to him through a shaft of sunlight, becoming a black silhouette. Elijah had to squint to see him. The silhouette became a boy again, wrapping his arms around the old man's leg, proudly showing him the grubs. The stranger laid a bony hand on his head while looking at Elijah with eyes black as swamp water. "Do you see them?" he asked. His low voice reminded Elijah of a rumbling, far-off storm, and felt just as comforting. "I asked, do you see them?" Elijah didn't understand the question, but answered anyway, "Yes, sir, I see him." Holding the fat boy's hand, the stranger stepped toward him. He exuded warmth and affection, a grandfatherly aura, with a spidery sense of menace. Towering over Elijah, he looked as worn out as his suit, like someone had folded him up and left him in a closet for a few years. His skin was withered bark, his eyes two orbs of starless night. He had a thin mouth and long piano-keyed teeth, a beak nose too big for his face, a dagger-like gray goatee. Elijah squirmed under his gaze, the depthless eyes staring at him, into him, shrinking and swallowing him. The stranger had the pungent odor of the swamp on him, and something stronger. The sickly sweet smell of that Orisha doll Miss Margaret had, so strong Elijah felt ill, that he didn't want to leave this man. The stranger stared at him for a time. "Yes," he said finally, excitement in his voice. "Yes!" He grinned, wrinkles crisscrossing his face like cracks on ice. "Son, I would like to see you again, to discuss things. Could you visit me tomorrow? Elijah nodded. He couldn't dream of saying no. Good. I live on Burger's Hill. Look for the house that says Redbone. Taking Man-Boy's hand in his, he led him into the swamp. Before Elijah could ask why they didn't head for the road, they walked into the amber sunlight. He blinked and they were gone. Chapter 2. The Man on Burger's Hill. Let's say grace. Pa closed his eyes and clasped his hands. Take that off the table, Cornbread. Oh, sorry. Cousin Cornbread moved the bottle of gin to his lap. Elijah laughed out loud. The family thanked the Lord and started eating their chicken, mashed potatoes, and sweet, sweet buttermilk biscuits. Every time Elijah looked up from his food, Cornbread gave him a warm smile. Elijah had helped Mama cook the meal, the whole time daydreaming about the mysterious stranger. Pa put his fork down. Are you gonna stop playing in town? He asked Cornbread pointedly, not for the first time. Cornbread waved his hand dismissively. Why should I? There's a 2-bit dive right down the road, said Pa. You can play there, if you have to go to a place like that. Town's the only place around here that pays decent money. At the cost of your life? Pa shot back. What example are you setting for the boys? I know you made some white friends in France, but that's France. Folk over here ain't like folk over there. You're a damn fool, Cornelius. He slammed his fist on the table. Elijah pressed his back against the chair, frightened by the tense silence that followed. Tell us about Paris, Mama said, sounding eager to change the subject. Frowning, Pa dismembered his chicken with a knife and fork. Cornbread washed the potatoes down with gin. Most of what happened there I can't say in front of children. He gave Elijah a wink. I loved it, though. The sights, the people, the clubs. I tell you, the Buffalo Soldiers took over Paris. Hell, Mama glared at him sharply. Heck, I mean. I'll tell y'all about the time we met up with these English soldiers in the cabaret. Elijah couldn't feel the same excitement he usually felt during Cornbread's stories. The mood had been poisoned. After half an hour listening to Cornbread, Pa gruffly sent the boys to bed. He reminded Joe and David that they needed to help him with the cabinet in the morning, and Elijah felt a pang of jealousy as he knelt beside the bed and pressed his palms together. He prayed for Cornbread, for the first time afraid that God wasn't listening. The house sweltered like an oven at night. Elijah lay at the end of the bed, under his corner of the tattered blanket. He fell asleep. In his dreams, he stood in the doorway of a hut so small it could fit inside his cabin. Elijah felt like he was in somebody's body, stepping inside without thought. 5 candles stood on a table. Tall and red, they blasted him with unnatural heat, calling him so strongly he could hear their siren voices. We can answer your questions, they whispered, but you have to come to us. His eyes snapped open. The dream had seemed so real, its enticement just as strong in the waking world. Every time he tried to sleep again, he saw those black eyes, smelled that sickly sweet smell. He couldn't wait any longer. Elijah got dressed. Quietly, he climbed out the window like he did on nights he went frog hunting. Feeling a thrill of fear and excitement, he